Cliff Notes version of neuroeconomics is how does brain structure function play into how we assign value to things? And what are we doing as home builders if not trying to contribute value? And how we're going to get someone to buy our product over another product is, does my product feel like a good value to them? And value is not just dollars and cents. It is, how does it make you feel? How does it live for you? How do you feel as part of the community? And a lot of times a buyer or customer will come in and say like it's down to price, but that's not true. And as you start talking to people, yes, dollars make a huge difference to us, but like that's not the end all be all on how we make our decisions. We make our decisions on how people, places, and things make us feel.
Welcome to the Builder Straight Talk podcast with your host, Michael Creasa. Get the unfiltered truth from the trenches of construction, real estate, and funding. This episode is made possible by our parent company, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.
What happens when, as a kid, you grow up around construction, you leave to go to school, get an education, you come back to the family business, and ultimately you're the one that takes over? Stepping into a founder's shoes is one thing, but earning the credibility inside the business is something completely different. So in this week's episode, my friend, I get to sit down with Andi Bliss, and she is the president of Brookline Homes, and they build roughly 100 to 120 homes a year in Charlotte, North Carolina, in the surrounding area. And their focus is on first-time buyers and move-up. Now, she didn't take the traditional path into leadership. With a background in neuroscience, behavioral economics, and real estate investment, she came back into the business, worked across purchasing, sales, construction, land, and ultimately earned the role she holds today as president. So here are just some of the things that we talked about in this interview. What it really looks like to earn your place inside the family business, not to inherit it. The moment leadership actually shifts when people start coming to you and not the founder. Why most builders misunderstand what buyers are actually looking for and how that impacts the decision-making process and sales. Her approach to building for first-time buyers, where price, value, and experience collide. How her background in psychology and economics reshapes how she thinks about homes, communities, and value, and why culture, people, and internal alignment are the real drivers behind a scalable company, and much, much more. And speaking of much, much more, with a click of your mouse, pretty please, click, like, and subscribe to our podcast so much, much more builders like you can enjoy what we're doing here at Builder Straight Talk. No advertising, no fluff, just great content. So again, pretty please, with a click of a mouse, subscribe, like, and share. And without further ado, let's jump into this interview with Andi Bliss. Andi, I want to say thank you for being on the call today. I'm really excited about having you on the podcast. You've done so much, and you're building, let's call it, for lack of a better word, a real estate empire. So I'm really excited about unpacking the story, finding out more about you and how you build. And I think our builders that are listening in are going to glean, I like that word, glean, a lot of wisdom from our time together today. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Okay, well, let's start off with the simple. Tell us a little bit about your company, how many homes you do a year, price point, that kind of stuff. Give us a little bit of the backstory.
Sure. So my company is Brookline Homes. We've been in business since 2014. We build about 100 homes per year, some years a little more, some years a little less. We also do land acquisition and development. So kind of run the full gamut, but I specialize in first-time buyers as well as move-down buyers. So that subsect of the market that is a little harder to build for, getting a really great product at a really great price, but definitely where my heart is and where my team's heart is.
What hat do you wear within the organization now?
Well, like a lot of small builders and small companies in general, I wear a ton of hats. My proper title is president, but my title for many years, unofficial, it used to be official title, was chief executive rainmaker. And that was given to me by Tammy Smoot, who used to be with BDX, now with Enter Now. She has She is my unofficial, official industry mom. She calls herself my helicopter mom. And when I first started working with her, I was doing purchasing, but then I was doing purchasing and marketing. And then I was doing marketing, purchasing, closing coordinating, then sales managing. And then as we started hiring more people, I got to transition a little bit out of some of those roles and more into the land acquisition and development. Today, I am president. I am the visionary. I am the sales manager as well as our land acquisition person. So all the hats. And that was kind of why the title of chief executive rainmaker was always a fun title because it's like, what do? I don't know. I do whatever I need to do to make it rain.
Well, let's correct the salutations, Madam President. Thank you for being on the call. Let's get that out of the way. And I've got an umbrella in the background just in case it does start raining, so we got that covered too.
It's raining here
Uh,
today.
oh man, it in Canada we have two types of weather: cold and not cold.
Mm.
It's basically that simple. But let's go back before where you are today. Obviously, you grew up in construction because it was your father's company, but it seems like you chose a path other than construction. So you ran away to go to university. Tell us a little bit about that journey and what you accumulated along the way.
Sure. So winding all the way back, I was born in New Mexico. My parents had a custom home building company called SMD Homes, building incredible custom homes in New Mexico. New Mexico is a really special place if you haven't been out there. At like 3-ish, instead of watching cartoons on the couch, I was out frame punching houses with my dad, and it was frame punching because I was not the most helpful, but I had a little pink tool belt that I hauled around with me full of nails to hand him whatever. And then after preschool, they would put me in their drafting room, which they learned pretty quickly meant that any plans that were within reach would end up with crayons on them. I thought I was fixing plans. So, I was redlining plans at like 4-ish years old, probably not
So
making.
you were already putting your seal of approval on at that age using crayons.
Sure was. I don't know that
Okay.
any of my changes ever made it to a customer's house. I sure hope they didn't. But yeah, I was looking at plans at like 4. So grew up in the industry. We moved around a ton. My dad worked for several of the different national builders. So Pulte, Centex, KB, we got moved all over the place from New Mexico to Colorado to Utah to Charlotte, North Carolina to Omaha, Nebraska, back to Charlotte, North Carolina. And so I was always in the industry and started model home hosting at 18 and loved the industry, but it's just not what I thought my path was. So I went off to Emory University, bound and determined to become a neurosurgeon. I had done a internship in high school with neurosurgeons where I got to sit in and watch spinal fusions and just all sorts of crazy surgeries happen, like in the surgery theater. So I went to Emory University because at the time they had the only undergraduate neuroscience program in the country. So I double majored in neuroscience and behavioral biology and then economics. And the economics was a elective class that I took that I fell in love with and found that where my passions really were was that intersection of economics and neuroscience, which is all the consumer behavior and neuroeconomics all gets into like how we assign value to things and like what gets people excited. So the consumer behavior piece was funny because it's like that ended up kind of calling back to home building, even though I didn't realize it at the time. So after graduating, I went and worked at a neuroscience based marketing firm, thinking that I wanted to play in that space for a little while, maybe go and get a PhD in neuroeconomics. Decided that wasn't really my jam and that I instead wanted to switch over to working at a hedge fund. So I worked at a hedge fund that specialized in distressed real estate. And I think that was that hook where it's like, okay, no, real estate is always where I wanted to be. And that felt like that amazing space where I got to play out all of that. So worked there for 3 years, loved what I was doing, was working crazy hours as that industry is known for. Our compatriots were the founders of American Homes for Rent and Invitation Homes, like we were part of the group that spun all of those industries out. Those were all of our friends in the industry. So that was really cool watching that space grow and evolve. And my tail end there, I started in investor relations and moved into asset management. And while in asset management, I ended up managing our 1,000 REO properties, real estate owned properties, properties that our hedge fund owned that we were then renting out. And my bosses realized that I knew a heck of a lot more about construction than any of them did. And so I ended up being the boots on the ground working with all of the contractors looking at their bids, and so I was calling my dad all the time, like, "This bid seems weird, like, walk me through this. They're telling me they wanna, strip and refinish laminate floors. You can't do that." And it was one of those things where these unscrupulous characters were like, "Oh, hedge fund money, they don't know any better, they'll pay anything." Well, I knew something and therefore was not their favorite person. But through all of that, my dad had left his job at a regional builder and decided that he was going to start his own company. And his idea was that he wanted to take all of his learnings from the nationals and build his own thing. And so weekends mostly, I was helping him do all of the preliminary legwork on branding and identifying customer profiles and working on, like, our ideal customer avatar and all of that, and eventually he convinced me that I needed to quit my job at the hedge fund and come and help him build Brookline Homes, and as any 26-year-old would be, I was terrified because I thought I had the best gig in the world at this hedge fund, and I'm like, "Ooh, I don't know that I wanna be in home building," and within, like, the first week, I'm like, "No, this was it. This was always it."
So let's summarize this by saying wow, wow, and wow. First point, your father traveling. I suspect he wasn't a builder. It's probably witnessed relocation, and he'll share that with you, I'm sure, one day soon. In terms of your past, holy jumping it, it's like a relationship with an ex boyfriend. You try to leave, you get pulled back every time. So every time you try to leave real estate, you're getting pulled back in. It reminds me of, and you'll have to Google this, young lady, because it's before your time. The Beatles, the rock band, the Beatles, and the song was "The Long and Winding Road." So there's no straight, clear cut path for you. You've been winding everywhere, but it's that experience that you've garnered along the way that's brought you to this position. So let me ask you this question: When I don't want to say you left real estate, but technically when you went off to school
I
and
did.
you were on this journey, when you came back and started working with your dad, did you notice anything different in terms of the way it was done when you were there initially and the way it was done now that you were back and something that you wanted to change?
I don't know that there was, like, any one thing per se. I think some of it was I was a little older and understood things a lot better, but some of it too was because it was his company and we were the decision makers. It was a lot more opportunity to challenge the status quo, and that was a lot of his and my arguments, and they ended up being very loud arguments because he and I are both pretty passionate people, where he's like, "Well, this is how it's always been done." I'm like, "But why? Why is this how it's always been done? I don't understand." And so I don't know that it was, like, any one thing that I noticed, but it was, like, all those little things where I'm like, "Okay, I know this is how it's always been done, but" and we've been building shelter for thousands of years, but today information moves too fast, buyer preferences move too fast, like, we don't need to keep doing the things the way they've always been done.
Well, let me jump on that one, Andy, because that's interesting because it goes back to what you were doing with your behavioral psychology. What is it that builders are missing then when you put on that hat or that lens specifically? What are they missing completely, or how are they misreading buyers today?
I think a lot of industries can be guilty of this. Ours certainly can be. As home builders, we have our own preferences, and we're not always great at stepping out of our own preferences and biases and looking at things through the lens of a customer. And it can be something as simple as brand preferences, what our preference for sheathing or your HVAC system or any of that, a first time buyer doesn't have that same preference. Their preference is something that works great, that they're not going to have maintenance on, that is a great value, and at the end of the day works. They don't care what the badge is. And we can get so hung up on some of those things without stepping out of our own shoes and thinking about that. And I think that's something that my team is really good at challenging is my team is super diverse in ages, gender, ethnicity, background, everything, and is pretty reflective of the kinds of individuals that are buying our homes. And so it's pretty easy for us to like go to each other and be like, "Hey, do you have a preference on this or do you have a preference on that or what does this mean to you?" Our office manager is 21, and so she gets picked on a whole lot of like, "Hey, have you heard of any of these things?" And she's like, "No, I have no idea what you're talking about." We're like, "Ding ding ding. You're not our buyer per se because you're 21. We would love for you to be able to buy a house, but that's not the age of the first time buyer right now." But challenging those ideas, I think, are so critical. And then I think the other thing that we're not great at doing is when we design homes on paper, we're not always the best at thinking about how that home's actually going to live. Something that works really well in 2D versus when you're in the middle of rushing to get ready for work or rushing to get kids out the door to school or carrying all of your groceries in from Costco, like certain things just like don't work in real life that work really well on paper. And stepping back and really thinking about how a home lives and how your furniture is going to fit in it is just a different perspective. I think that's one of those things that being a woman, I use a little bit as a superpower because a man designing a home and a woman designing a home are not going to be the same. Like my preferences are not the same as my husband's or as my director of operations. Like we just view life through a different lens.
Well, from a guy's perspective, we're basically cavemen. So where's my man cave vis-a-vis the garage? Does the toilet flush? I'm happy. Okay,
Yeah.
so
And my
let me ask
husband's
you.
like, I need the highest speed internet humanly possible with all of the power drops everywhere because he wants to have a server farm.
So let me ask you this. Have you noticed, is there a change in buyer priorities? Let's say if you look back a few years ago to where we are now, are they, again, prioritizing, are there certain things that they're looking for now that are like a must have that they weren't looking at before?
Not super in my buyer profile, especially in that first time buyer. The most critical is having safe, reliable shelter at a price point that they can afford to pay. There hasn't been as many wild shifts. Like I know COVID, it became very important to have like the home office. And that is something we still see in our customers of like, where is my desk going to be? But it's not as critical as it was at that point in time. I think there's a little more awareness around like healthy home living and having those spaces to decompress. And so we're mindful about, again, like furniture placement and how a home is going to live. I don't know that that really answered your question though.
No, that's good because it just opened up another door. You said healthy home living. Is that something? So there is a designation. There
There is.
actually is a movement right now for healthy homes. There's another one for performance homes, and to me, there's an overlap there. Better way of constructing, but the other one is a more holistic. Is the term they like to throw around? Is that something that you're conscious of with the homes that you built?
We're conscious, but we don't go after the designations. We think of everything that we're building from a super holistic point of view, and that's start to finish of lean and efficiency, like making sure that like homes are constructed really, really well with quality material and not excess. It does not benefit anyone to have excess number of Jackson Kings in their framing that is not actually gonna make the house any better. It's just wasteful, and that waste ends up contributing to the bottom line cost and price of the house, and That's not what our buyer is looking for. So we really think through how we build, being very clean and tight and efficient with all of our trade partners, with our team. And we really view every home that we're building as if we were building it for a family member, someone who we love, not a random person. And that's one of the benefits of working with the smaller builder is every customer is a person to us. We're able to have those conversations of like, how are you living in this space? And I don't do a ton of structural changes to the homes, but when I start hearing feedback from customers consistently of, "Oh, this could be a little better," or "This doesn't work," it's like, "Okay, yeah, you're right. My bias got in the way here. Let's rethink this."
It seems if I were to use an analogy, manufactured versus crafted, you guys are focused on crafting a home, if I can use that term, versus it's a production model, like Henry Ford. Yes, here's the Model T. You can have any color you want, provided it's black, and that's as far as you could customize it. Whereas for you guys, it is about the experience and that you're creating something that you can be proud of, but more importantly, that your buyers will really appreciate and want to live in. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. We don't have a ton of we don't have custom options, period. We don't have a ton of options, but we're really mindful of what those options are. Everything is curated by a designer following the latest trends. And we found that that's a huge part of that customer experience. Buying a house is so wildly stressful. We do not need to add more stress to a customer by making them pick through 17 shades of white. Like, it's not a good experience. It's really stressful for them. So let's take some of those pain points out of the process and focus on the exciting parts of the process.
Is there something if we were to go down a subdivision and driving through Atlanta, let's say a couple of them, is there anything that stands out in your mind that you would go, "Ha ha, that's one of our homes," versus somebody else's? Is
Um,
there I don't wanna say signature feature, but is there something that really stands out to you that would make it distinct from everybody else's?
Yeah. So we build all over the Charlotte market, mostly around the 485 loop, which I know a lot of cities have a interstate loop like that. Our homes kind of have a similar look and feel to a degree. So sense of place is really important to me. And so when we are building in an area, I want to make sure that our homes reflect the sense of place of that area. One of my current communities, Edgewood Preserve, is right next to a historic farmhouse that has two historic properties on it. It's one of the oldest houses in all of Mecklenburg County. There is a log cabin from like 1920 or 40, something like that on it, and then a 19 or 1890s, somewhere in there, farmhouse that's white with black accents, and it's just like your turn of the century farmhouse. And so when I was building there, the townhomes all took from that look and feel so that they kind of feel like part of that. When we built in Aberfoyle Village, which was a historic mill, our townhomes took inspiration from the mill buildings so that it felt like it belonged there. That's something you may not notice at first glance, but our customers and our realtor partners do consistently tell us that, like, they feel like our properties belong in the communities we're putting them in rather than someone else might just drop whatever floor plan, whatever, with no thought of what's around it.
That's a very interesting point. There's a vacation area not far from here. It's our ski area, and I can't really call it a ski hill compared to, Colorado and stuff, but Blue Mountain. And builders came in and they did row housing, they did townhomes. And there's a part in Toronto called Brampton, high density. Like high density, the homes are cookie cutters. They're not aesthetically pleasing, let's put it that way. And they just dropped tracks of them in this really beautiful aesthetic place. So you're driving along, doodly doo. You're taking in the scenery, apple orchards, because that was another thing that Blue Mountain was known for, apples. And then suddenly it's like, okay, who brought downtown Toronto and dropped it here? Like high density, ugly. nothing redeeming about these places.
I hate that.
And yeah, so kudos to you for having the sense to go, okay, we're trying to build something. And maybe this gets back to that holistic idea that we want it to be healthy. We want it to be well built, but we also want it to be able to blend in. So you feel like you're not only part of the neighborhood, but you're part of the culture, community, if you will.
Absolutely. It is so important to us that we are benefiting a community and that we're thinking about how we participate in that community because we're locals and we're not a national brand that is dropping into places where we don't live. Like my team has kids that are playing on the local soccer teams or in the local dance troupe or any of those things. So that community and sense of place is so, so important to us. And I think it's when you're buying that first house, I want you to be so excited about it, and I want it to be so beautiful. So often we've gotten to a point where we've almost taken too much out of the aesthetic of a home, and just adding a little bit of that gingerbread can really just worlds different. Like, I almost exclusively do 8-foot tall front doors. Are they a little more expensive? Sure. Does that have the most wow factor that you just like you walk in and it is just, I have arrived. And they bring light into your living or into your foyer area, but not the kind of light where people can be like peering in through your front door. Because the light is high enough that you can't see into the house, but you're able to get all that natural light. And that light, the windows, all of that, I think is so important to that, like, holistic how we live and feel in a home, especially in a townhome. We build a ton of townhomes, and townhomes can feel dark and small and cramped, and when you really think through how you have natural light coming in and how your furniture lives in it, your home can feel and live so much bigger than it actually is, and all of that just comes down to, like, how do we live in these spaces?
How much of your psychology background are you applying now into your so is this part of it? Like, when you're looking at something, not only is it a selling feature, but obviously you're trying to trigger the emotions of the buyers to buy your build as opposed to somebody else. How much of that has spilt over into what you do?
Oh, 100% of us has spilled over. So, uh, like, the Cliff Notes version of neuroeconomics is how does brain structure function play into how we assign value to things? And what are we doing as home builders if not trying to contribute value? And how we're going to get someone to buy our product over another product is, does my product feel like a good value to them? And value is not just dollars and cents. It is, how does it make you feel? How does it live for you? How do you feel as part of the community? And a lot of times a buyer or a customer will come in and say like it's down to price, but that's not true. And as you start talking to people, yes, dollars make a huge difference to us, but like that's not the end all be all on how we make our decisions. We make our decisions on how people, places, and things make us feel. And so building something that makes someone feel really good and being working with a company that makes you feel valued, that's critical. It is the funny, weird roundabout way that I feel like I was always destined to end up here. And I think some of that's just like, it's a different way of thinking about our customers.
I guess you could say that there's something about the utility of the thing, which is functional versus, as you said, the emotional feeling that you, and a perfect example is, people that are running out and spending $120,000 on a Ford F-150. It's a truck, so by definition, what does it do? It goes, you throw things in the back of it and you can take them from point A to point B.
Yes,
But 120 grand, like, and so they're financing a truck, paying almost as much, if not more, than they would on a house to live in. And
absolutely.
that's not based on utility. It's not based on logic, even though people will say, "Oh, yeah, I bought it because it makes sense." It's the emotion that is always that underwriting force.
It's that psychology, and, like, that psychology comes into play in warranty and customer service and brand recognition and all of those things. Yeah, you're 100% right. Like that $120,000 truck, does it perform wildly differently from a 40 or $50,000 truck? Maybe, maybe not. But that price difference isn't as much about what's in the engine as it is about how that brand makes us feel.
Yeah, let's do. I want to go a bit deeper into the psychology here because I think on the pre-call you and I were talking, and I mentioned Dr. Robert Cialdini, who was like the forefather of influence, and he wrote the book on the principles of influence. And the big thing that he was trying to stress is influence isn't. When he wrote the book and he did the research, it wasn't about trying to manipulate people. It was more about helping them in the decision-making process because people can be overwhelmed, and so by politely nudging them, you get them to go in the direction that they wanted to go, but there were obstacles that they put in their own way. So let's talk about this from a couple different points of view. When a potential buyer is meeting with your people, your sales team for the first time, are there principles of influence that you've applied into, let's call it the whole buying process? And that could be the initial consult, what you're doing along the way. And then let's take that one step further. When you have your show homes done, how much of that influence and psychology have you applied to that too?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um,
That's why you get paid the big bucks, Andy.
I feel like we've done a lot of little things, and this is making me think we should probably be more intentional with the strategy. So we've done a ton of little things that certainly are all geared around how a potential buyer feels entering into our show homes or working with my sales team. Some of it is the kind of people that we hire. People are your superpower. That at the end of the day, like your people are the most important piece of the puzzle when it comes to building an amazing team. And so we're really intentional about or about how we hire, and that's whether it's for sales or office manager or superintendent or anything. We want to make sure that someone has the skills to do a job, but most skills you can teach. But more than that, we want to make sure they have the right personality. And our team is very like all in this together. Teamwork makes the dream work. And our official core value that I'm going to talk about is respect, but how we actually talk about it as a team is no assholes. And it's no assholes to each other. We don't deal with asshole or
Hold
customers.
on, time out a second. I thought you said apples. You're saying assholes.
Assholes, yes.
Oh, okay. I thought this was a plug for Apple.
No,
Okay, sorry for Mac. Okay.
yes, no assholes. That all boils down to respect, but I want to make sure that everyone on my team fully respects each other and respects the customers and our trade partners. And that is a two-way street. So if someone comes in and is being a jerk to any one of my team members, we are not selling a house to them. I do not care how much money they want to throw at us. Like, life is too short to deal with jerks. Because our customers are first time buyers and move down buyers. So you have your people who are totally inexperienced and you have your people who are downsizing, who've been through a lot of houses. You get a lot of different personalities. And I think my sales team and my superintendents knowing that this is a core value to us empowers them to say, hey, you're out of line. You don't get to behave like that towards me, and show a customer the door. But that also they know that they're looked at in that way where they need to be super supportive, amazing, and helpful, and that's the kind of people I have on my team. So, first is people. To go along with that, we have mascots that are dogs. Dogs have been a part of our company since day one. It started as a space filler on our first iteration of our website. I wanted to have lifestyle photos, and I didn't have any of those lifestyle photos of our customers. And so I staged a photo shoot with my Springer Spaniels to have them do the things that a customer would be doing. So I have one where Leonardo is sitting with our sales agent, like going through a contract. And I have another one where he is reviewing plans. And I had another one where he was sitting out, like doing a lot walk. And those photos aren't all on the website, but they're still part of the website. And we found unintentionally that our buyers tended to have really strong feelings towards dogs. They were first time buyers who didn't have kids yet, but they had dogs, or moved down buyers, the kids are out of the house. And so they have dogs. And so unintentionally, our buyer portfolio or buyer profile, rather, was much more dog friendly than you would think on the surface. And so that ended up continuing because we then started building this culture where dogs were just always in the office. And so dogs ended up getting job titles here. And so Rafaela is our senior architect. As a puppy, she was really, really interested in shredding floor plans because puppy. And so architect. So then
Architect.
Leonardo became the junior architect. And then when I got Donatello, are you hearing a theme here?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
when I got Donatello, he became our assistant professional shopper. So purchasing assistant because he was doing product durability testing, i.e., shredding all of the carpet samples and chewing up EVP samples and durability testing.
So it's safe to say your company's gone to the dogs.
Our company has 100% gone to the dogs. And then we also have Marley, who was our marketing assistant, but I think she recently got a promotion to canine financial officer. So their photos are in our model homes. They are life size, gigantic photos of our dogs right behind the salesperson's desk. And a couple of my sales agents bring their dogs to the models, mostly on Fridays, not so much on Saturday and Sundays, but just found that being more casual and comfortable, like the dogs and that whole mentality and not taking ourselves super seriously and trying to be the most buttoned up professional looking builder ends up putting people at ease in a way that you can't do super easily. Um, but yet having the dogs around or having those little snippets of silly help take some of that stress out of the process.
You've kind of unleashed the evil creative side of my brain because now I'm working with like puppy approved or something like that. So I can see as you're doing the build various stages because your buyers want to see, the foundation's been poured, it's been framed, the evolution of the home. It's like the puppy comes out there wagging its tail, so it's been puppy approved.
Yep.
If something hasn't been done properly, you've got a dog taking a pee on it. Oh, okay, this one hasn't been approved, right? So
I
it's been marked to be revisited. Let's put it that way.
I love this. I think you have now given me homework for social campaigns because that's hilarious.
Young lady, my job is done. I can ride off into the sunset now. Call it a day. Okay, let's go.
I
So I've given you a lot of latitude here, Andy. Like you've drifted off course, but you've also opened up doors for another couple questions here. So we'll pull it back in a sec. You're obviously building a culture. You're trying to build a community first within your community. Let's call it for what it is. Is this something that you did? So when you came back to the company and you said at the beginning you've got a 21-year-old, so obviously you've got, milk and cookie time and they take naps throughout the day. Was this a conscious decision that you made that you wanted to create this melting pot of different talents, different people? Or was that already there when you came back?
It was not here. So part of it is that my dad founded the company in 2014. I came on in 2016. So when I came on, it was my dad, my little brother was a superintendent, Jamie was a superintendent. We had Brad, who was our production manager, me, and we had a part time bookkeeper. As the company grew, we had to add more talent. I'm much more comfortable doing interviews and all of that than my father is. And some of that is the psychology and some of that is previous jobs that I've held where intentionally, unintentionally, I ended up doing a lot of our hiring process. He would evaluate skill set, but I would end up evaluating personality. And as the company has grown and I've been given the latitude to do that, I think I've hired some people that he probably would not have hired. And I think we're better for it because if your team is not reflecting who you're building for, you are not solving for those blind spots at all. Like, we get very much into our own confirmation biases of this is how things should be. This is how I like stuff. So that's how everyone else likes stuff. Well, that's not true. And you really limit your customer basis if you're not considering what they are looking for.
I guess you could say it's the skill and the application. So if your dad, and going back to what we talked about, the practicality of a truck, your dad's looking at somebody that has the ability to use a hammer. From your perspective, you want to make sure that same person isn't going to throw the hammer
A
because
hundred
they have to
percent.
fit into your culture,
A hundred
right?
percent.
Yeah. So this brings up the obvious question: succession. As you're taking more and more control of the company, your dad is politely, I'll say, stepping back and golfing and doing the
Yeah.
things that dad loves to
He's
do.
retired. We don't see him.
So he's okay.
We might see him every 2 or 3 Mondays.
And I don't mean to offend in any way that, but why you? Why Andy, not one of the boys? Why not a builder that your dad's been taking under his wing and grooming all these years? How was it that it fell on you? And was that a conscious decision that your dad made? Or was it Andy saying, I'm here, here's what I can do? Was it a mutual thing then that you were kind of pulling on the reins, if you will, and your dad realized that this was the right way to do it?
Yeah, 100%. I think it took a little while for us both to realize it, but I think there reached a point in time where it was apparent that I was going to be the heir apparent. And some of that was that I kept challenging him and I kept pushing things and changing how we were looking at things and how we were building in a way that he saw our customers responded really, really well to. I think there was a point where we realized that I was taking over the company without intentionally taking over the company. There reached the point where people stopped going to him for problems or questions. They were coming to me and I was helping them solve them. And we reached this point where he's like, wow, everything is going so amazing. We have no problems. Everything's going so smoothly. This is great. I don't have to be in the office all the time. This team is great. And I'm like, actually, things are not running super smoothly. I am just working with the team to solve problems before they ever get to you because these problems don't need to get to you. These are things that we can solve without burdening you. And so I think that gave him the confidence to be able to start stepping back. And then during COVID, like I know a lot of companies did, we started looking down. We took a really hard look at our business plan and who we wanted to be. And at that point in time was when we started thinking, okay, maybe this is something where my dad would be interested in turning the company over to me to run. And so during COVID, we did a lot of internal processes of, straightening out job functions and becoming more efficient. And I decided that if I was going to run a successful business of this size, that I needed to get more educated because he had 40 years of experience and experience and education are not the same, but I knew I needed to gain a lot of knowledge really fast. And so I went back to school and got my master's of science in real estate as well as my MBA. And do I think that's what you need to do to run a successful company? No, absolutely not. But it gave me a lot of tools to accelerate my knowledge very quickly and more than anything, gain my confidence in my ability to run the company.
Let me ask
So,
you this, Andy. So I interviewed recently Chris Lyons,
yeah.
and Chris has a company in Texas. He's also the president of the Texas Association of Builders, and he was sharing, looking back. He'd be driving home at night, and he would see the lights are still on at his dad's office. So it was a family construction company, building company. And he said, it's 10 o'clock at night. I'm driving back and I see the lights on and dad's still working. And because his father did everything, he did the invoicing, he did the, you know, um, going onto the sites, did the inspections, he did the quotes, like everything was wrapped around his father. And, I like to go back to Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth. So what his father had done is he had created a job for himself. This wasn't a career. It wasn't a business. It was something that was consuming him. And if he left, the business would collapse. So in essence, it was a glorified job. And if we extrapolate that further, if you look at the amount of hours that he would spend, and let's assign a value to that, let's say $100 an hour, he would probably be making more money at McDonald's flipping burgers than the amount of time that he was putting into the business. So as you evolved and you went back and got your master's, so obviously you were attuned to this. Have you then structured the company in such a way that you've got systems in place that if Andy wants to blow off for a month to the Bahamas, this puppy, this puppy, okay, the tail will still
Yeah,
keep
let's keep it
wagging on
going.
this puppy. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Going back to the idea of people first, you need to take care of your people and you need to take care of yourself. You cannot fill anyone else's cup if your cup is empty. And how you do that is you build in a way that is really efficient, and you have the systems in place, you have the cross training in place, your team is empowered and they know what they need to be doing so that no single person has to carry all of the burden. And that's one of those ways that we are constantly evaluating what we're doing to make sure that no one person is carrying too much. And if they are, how do we reallocate, or how do we use AI or any other tool to improve that? And some of that comes down to a little bit of a difference in generations as well. Your boomer generation and silent generation, you were expected to work at the same place your entire career. There was that mentality that the best worker was the first to show up and the last to leave. Well, that's bullshit. That is maybe your best worker, but it's also maybe your most inefficient worker. I want the people who can get the job done well, efficient, and move on to the next thing rather than spinning their wheels on something. And I'm a millennial. Wellness and self care are super important to me. And I inflict those feelings on all of the rest of my team, where I am super candid with my team of how I am feeling and about going to therapy and about any personal things that I am working through. And that means my team is also super open and candid about those things, to the point where we're able to pick up for each other when someone needs a little bit of relief. And that is a different culture and mindset that I think you're seeing in a lot of businesses, but especially as your millennials and Gen Z are becoming more into management roles. We just have a different view on work life than previous generations. But I think that also means I do not want anyone in my team to have to show up masking. And by masking, I mean putting on a face or a personality that is not them. I want everyone to be able to show up as their most authentic, real self, because we spend entirely too much time together to have to be faking it. You spend more time with your coworkers than you do with your family and friends. And so it's really important that everyone is that truly cares about each other and knows each other, and no one is having to be this fake version of themselves. And that shows up in how they do their work and how they relate to our customers. And like, it all ends up being cyclical, because people are more excited about buying a home from one of my team members who is just glowing about how much they love working here and how much they love our company, versus if they were to go and show up somewhere where they're just like, oh hey, go and look at a house. Um,
I've got this vision of your weekly meetings where everybody gathers in a circle, sings Kumbaya, and then we start the day. Is that
no, we
okay?
we are not that at all. One of my employees fires me on an almost daily basis if I ask her to do something that she does not have time to do, or she finds overwhelming, or she doesn't want to do. She'll fire me. She'll then do it. But it's like kind of her way of being like, "Oh my gosh, you're testing my patience." She fired
Well,
me
that'd be
at
cool. She fires you with pay, and you can blast off for the day. Yeah,
right.
I would take that. I would
Uh,
take that all the time.
she fired me at our holiday party 2 years ago because I was supposed to bring something for the setup and I forgot, and so I got fired. So it's more that we are not kumbaya, we are not high fives, we are keep it real, call each other out on our shit, but also, like, show up and support each other in a very real way.
Well, you're trying to find that balance between work and life. So some people, they work, that's all they do, and they have no life. Versus when you flip that around, you're not letting your work define what you do. Your work is the vehicle that allows you to do what you want to do when you're not working.
Well, and we spend too much time here to not love what we are doing. This
Yeah.
industry can be so wildly stressful, and we get through that by loving what we do and working with people who we love. Yeah, it is not a go and sit at a cubicle and crank out a job. Like, life is way too short for that.
I want to go back to the succession. And this is a question I think will be relevant to a lot of builders that are listening in. Because if they came into the family business, right, and they're working their way up, and a lot of them may have started working on the job site with dad, and they've covered all the different facets, so they have a really strong understanding of how the business works. Not necessarily that they're going to work in each of those departments, but they know how those departments work. In your case now, you're at this point when your dad and you are talking about succession. What was the actual process? Was it you're buying your dad out? Is there a share stock option involved? What was that part of it? And being that it's a family business, how do you then square the circle, if you will, with the siblings so they don't feel disjointed that they're not part of this decision, or were they? So I know there's a lot there in one question. I'm basically, if I were to dumb it down, how did your dad hand the ball to you?
Sure. So there is a multi-part story to go along with all that. My little brother, Eric, was my dad's first employee, and he was an assistant superintendent and then a superintendent, and then I came in, and I have worked literally every job in this company except for being a bookkeeper. That is I could do it, but not my forte, no thank you, but I've worked all the other positions. We tried to put my brother in purchasing for a minute, and it was very clear that that was not his forte, and became pretty clear that, like, home building actually wasn't the space for him. He loved building, but he didn't love customers, and that that's not what we do here. The customers are everything. And it's not just your customers that are buying, it's your internal customers, it's your trade partners. And he just was not, he just wanted to put his head down and work. And this industry, that may work in some parts of this industry, that may work in some companies, but that's just not how we were built. So he ended up leaving the company. And so that kind of cleared up the question a little bit of like, would he ever be the one in charge? And I think there wasn't ever a super big question about that because I am much more business focused than my brother, and so that wasn't ever really part of it. Jumping ahead to succession plan. So we looked at every possible route under the sun on succession planning. We talked to a bunch of different builders. We thought we had this great plan. We were going to do a leveraged buyout where I was going to be buying my dad out, and then tragedy struck our family. My little brother died April 29th of 2023, and that was a huge shock to our family. He had been sick, but I don't know that any of us realized that he was that sick. So just huge shock. And then my mom ended up dying less than 3 months later from a broken heart. The medical term is a Takotsubo cardiac arrest. So our family, our nuclear family of four became a family of two very fast. And all of this happened after I became president, after my dad had retired. And so the plan, we had already like started putting everything in place as to what that leveraged buyout would look like. And then when my brother died, that changed the structure a little bit because we were looking at having a trust and that changed. And then when my mom died, that completely changed everything. And so we now have our company in an irrevocable trust. I could talk your ear off about pros and cons of trust versus not. It was the right decision for us at the time because it was a way to ultimately reduce tax burden and all of that when I ultimately take over. But it does mean that I am not the owner per se, or the trust is the owner. And most of the time that doesn't matter, but every now and then you get into some like funny things that come up with a trust.
Can you unpack that just a bit? Because even obviously now you've intrigued me, which means builders. When you went the trust route, just very quickly, Andy, what are like, give me like three pros of why it's a good idea and maybe three of the counterpoints that maybe it's something you need to reconsider.
Sure. So an irrevocable trust is a pro, and this will get above my pay grade expertise. This gets into more like trust law and CPAs, but we were able to use my mother's lifetime tax exemption in putting the company in a trust so that when I am the sole beneficiary of the trust. So when the trust ultimately comes to me, there won't be all the estate taxes and all of that. So a trust is a really great way to transfer wealth without a huge tax burden. It also reduces some of the complications of going through probate or any of that when it comes to a death. Trusts have some natural protections built into them. And one of the things that wasn't immediately a thought, but it became a thought pretty quickly was my dad's wife of 42 years, my mother, had just died. We knew that he would remarry, didn't know when he would remarry, but we knew he would remarry. And so putting the company in a trust then meant that the new wife wouldn't be able to touch it. So if something were to go sideways with them or anything else, there would never be a claim against the company that she had nothing to do with. So that was a lot of why we did it. It makes a ton of sense. I would totally recommend any builder look into a trust. There's a lot of benefits. So cons end up being a little funny too. One of the psychological cons is that my dad is the trustee and I'm beneficiary. I do not own anything. The trust owns it. And so if he were to decide to do anything with the company, there's not a whole lot that I can do about that, which can be really frustrating when you feel like you are putting your blood, sweat, and tears into something, not feeling like you have control of your destiny.
So
Um,
theoretically, he could go on a drunken binge to Vegas and blow everything.
yes and no. The trust does protect against that to a certain degree, but like he could, this is where people will jump in and be like, that's not quite right. Yes, that's not quite right, but there are things that could be done. So a good example is he could sell the company, a company that I've been running for several years, and I can't do a whole lot about that. So it's more psychological than practical, but it's just like I don't have control of my over my own destiny. Other detriments is having a trust makes it a little more complicated in how he can draw owner's equity out of the company. So he built Brookline, he cashed out his 401k to build this thing, and a lot of his wealth is tied up in the company. And when you are the sole owner of a company, it's a lot easier to have access to that equity, whereas a trust complicates that.
So unlike an LLC where you can do dividends and shares at the end of the year, you can't do that within the trust?
You can. A good example is the money paid out by Brookline goes into the trust. The trust funds can be used for his lifestyle or lifestyle in general. It then starts getting a little complicated as to what is lifestyle versus what is not. So, could he pay for his golf club membership? Absolutely. Can he go and buy another house? Maybe, maybe not, because the trust has to stay at a certain level. And if he devalues the trust too much, then you're in violation of how a trust works.
I
Um,
think what we should do, Andy, this is really fascinating. This could be a part 2 to be continued.
yeah, I think this is something that I would probably want an expert to help, like, chime in a little bit or me to get the bullet points in front of me
Well,
because
here's an idea if you're up to it, then we could bring in the person that helped you set up the trust, be
yes,
that your accountant and your lawyer, and I think that would make for a fascinating conversation because
agreed.
then we could go deep into the weeds.
Yeah, and I think this is a topic that so many builders have questions on. Yeah,
Well,
I
because
would love
it's
to do
sad
that.
because you've get and I've seen this through the interviews that I've done. You'll have a builder that has put in their life's work into building their company. And that's why we talked about systems being so important because you have to be able to take yourself out of the equation so the puppy's tail can keep wagging.
Right,
I just throw that back at you. But if they don't do that, then at the end, it becomes okay, is anybody going to buy my company? Well, what are they buying? They're buying tools, right? Because I got no systems and they're buying what, a Rolodex? Maybe. So and the brand? Maybe, but there's really no value. Versus if I look at what you've done, you've got this big, basically entity in a box that you could hand over to somebody, they could buy it and it's gonna take off. And
absolutely.
so which assigns a whole different value to it. So to me, I think that would make for a fascinating conversation. So I'm gonna put to be continued on this one.
Okay,
Let's do a lane change here because I'm seeing the runways. We're making the approach. So, Andy, let me ask you this: we've looked at where you were once upon a time, where you are now, the growth of the company, your band of merry musketeers that you've assembled to help run this eclectic company of yours with puppies and tails wagging. My one question is: when you look back at where you are now, is there any one project that you did that defines you? That in your mind, when you drive by it and you think about it, this was Andy's signature moment that said, "This is now my company." Is there such a beastie?
I don't know that there was one project per se, because I think it was more a matter of timing. I think it became clear that it was my show instead of my dad's show when people stopped going to him for their problems, and when I started gaining that reputation in our industry where I was getting the phone calls instead of him. And one of the things that I did pretty early in this industry was going and becoming part of the Greater Charlotte HBA. And becoming part of the HBA, I went as a young, not dumb because I'm not dumb, but like young, dumb girl trying to learn the ropes and just asking all of the questions of anyone and everyone and started building relationships and started to make all these connections within our industry. And my dad, because of being in the Charlotte market for so long, so many of the people that he had been working with in the 90s were now division presidents and were running all of these companies. And so they were like this powerhouse group of men. And going to the HBA, there wasn't a ton of women, and there wasn't anyone my age. I was 26 when I started going to the HBA, and most of the people who were going to the HBA events, because a lot of them were held at, like, fancy steakhouses, were much more advanced in their careers. But I'm not shy, and I'm very comfortable going up to people and being like, "Hey, I have a question, like, can I pick your brain about XYZ? Or I saw you worked on this, like, can you tell me about it?" And it became this very, like, organic shift where we would go to HBA functions and everyone knew my dad and he was introducing me. And then it became the shift where it was me introducing him. And we were getting land sellers and brokers and everyone calling to talk to me instead of him. And it wasn't overnight, but that was definitely one of those points where he was like, "Oh, yeah, no, you're the face of this company now. Like, this is no longer Scott running the show. It's Andy's running the show with Scott's support."
Well, what you're doing, you're earning respect, which is a commodity. It's a method of exchange. And by being part of the association, people get to see you. You're not just some bubbly blonde that's your dad's sidekick. Like, you're actually taking charge. And I think by being there, people interact with you, they share ideas with you, they get to realize that you are a serious entity now with this company. And it's
Absolutely.
a process, like anybody, it's a process. So it's a stupid question, but I'll ask it anyway. Did you feel in any way that your growth, be within the company or in the association, was it inhibited at all because you're a woman?
Um, in the industry, yes. In the association, no, but a little bit yes. I got put on my first board. I was appointed to the board of directors as a presidential appointee when I was like 28, maybe. And it wasn't like stated per se directly. It kind of got stated indirectly that they were excited to have me on the board because I added diversity in gender and diversity in age. And so I kind of felt a little bit like tokenism, but at the same time, I'm like, ooh, buddy, if they think that they have added someone to this board to check some boxes, they have another thing coming because I am very opinionated and I try to keep my mouth shut and listen and gain knowledge before I talk. But sometimes my mouth has a mind of its own and my presence is made known whether I mean to or not. So I think I don't know that it was necessarily inhibited. I don't know that I would have gotten that opportunity to sit on that board when I did if I wasn't a young woman. And so
What board was that, Andy, that
it
you
was
sat on?
the Greater Charlotte Home Builders Association Board of Directors.
Okay.
So I became a part of the board of directors in 2018. And then in 2025, I was the president of the HBA of Greater Charlotte. So seventh largest HBA in the nation. I was the third ever female president of the board in 80 something years.
Good for you. Congratulations,
Thanks.
Madam President twice.
Past
Was that
president
President
now.
squared?
Past president.
Okay. Let's do this. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to touch on?
I would probably want to go a little bit more down this women's visibility in the industry.
Take it on.
Yeah. So because of being as part of the HBA, I then got introduced to professional women in building. And that was something that Tammy Smoot, who I mentioned previously, my helicopter mom in the industry, was the one who pulled me into that. And I didn't realize necessarily when I was joining it how much I needed that. Being a young woman in the South, I got a lot of things said to me by trade partners or by land sellers that, you're like, "Really? Like, this still happens?" Like, getting asked out on job sites, or we have a trade partner who refers to me as his girlfriends, and it's like, it's all in good fun. But then we'd also I'd occasionally get things like, "Oh, I wanna talk to the man in charge," or, "Don't worry your pretty little head about this, let the boys do the work," and I think to begin with, that bothered me. My dad was really good at being like, "Oh, no, like, she's who you're talking to," and I got really good at being like, yeah, sorry, I am the man in charge."
Let's put this in a context of what you've built your business around, your brand of the dog. So every dog's going to pull on the leash
Yeah,
until you pull back and let it know these are the boundaries.
right. Yes, I am no beta, I am an alpha. You will respect me regardless of my gender, age, background. That is how we should treat people anyway, but yeah, 100%. If you don't
Is it fair to say you had to prove yourself?
100%. And
There you go. Okay.
I think I leaned into my education more, and I know that's a very common thing that women do and feel like they need to do, that they need to be the smartest person in the room. They need to have more information that they have to prove themselves to be taken seriously, whereas and that's not women only, but I do think there's still a feeling of that, and I think this industry has gotten much better about that, but it's still there. I still get people coming in the door who don't wanna talk to me, they wanna talk to my production manager or my director of operations because 'cause they're men, and they assume that I just do design or just do sales, and it's I have a GC license too. I've built houses too. I've been in the field too. It's better than it used to be, but I don't know if it's better than it's used to be because the industry has changed or I'm just at a position where I don't see it as much. I do think that with the trade partners and spaces that we put ourselves in, we've gotten really good at shutting anything down like that where no one feels entitled to behave that way.
This is a good way to summarize that. If you had a do you have kids? I didn't even ask.
No, I actually don't.
Let's say you had a daughter and she wants to get into construction. What would you say to her?
What I was told when I joined the industry, my dad said that it was really good that I came from the hedge fund world because I already had a really thick skin because that is an industry that can be pretty tough. And so he's like, "You already have that coming into this industry." I think I would probably share a similar sentiment, but I don't know that it's necessarily about having so much a thick skin anymore. I think some of it is understanding where other people are coming from and viewing that with a degree of grace. A friend, mentor who works or who owns her own construction company in the commercial space, when she gets misogynistic comments, she's like, "Oh, honey, oh, that's so ignorant of you. Like, here, let me educate you." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like, that is what it comes down to, whether intentional or not. Like, some of those feelings are just ignorant, and so we can't take it too personal because most of the time it's not personal. And being able to step past someone saying something hurtful or offensive, it's like, "Oh, are you having a bad day? I'm sorry." Like, I'm gonna let you have your feelings, but I'm not gonna let your feelings impact how I feel. And I think that's a good lesson for anyone. Mel Robbins, the Let Them theory, totally recommend it to anyone. She talks a lot about that. And I think that's something
I
that anyone could take away from life of like how someone is behaving towards you may not be a direct reflection on you as a person. It's them.
It's like letting somebody completely irrelevant take control. So, good analogy. You're driving on the highway, somebody cuts you off, and suddenly you just get angry. You give them the finger, you're honking the horn on. So, yeah, a perfect stranger has done something and now has emotionally hijacked you,
Yeah.
and you've surrendered your autonomy, if you will, to a perfect stranger voluntarily. So you've surrendered your autonomy as opposed to going, yeah, F you, buddy, and just go about your way.
Right. Well, and you don't know what's going on in that person's life. They might have their pregnant wife in the car in active labor and they are rushing to the hospital. There are any number of things that are happening in all of our own personal lives that impact how we show up.
Or
And
in Andy's in your vernacular, the guy's just an asshole.
yeah, the guy's just an asshole. But like, is he trying to be an asshole? He is just trying to get his pregnant wife to the hospital. And so we can't make assumptions on what's going on in another person's life or head and we can't let other people hijack how we feel and how we show up.
Let's do a lane change, Andy, and leave this on a fun note. I'm going to do this is a part that I call rapid fire. And as a psychologist, I think you'll appreciate this. I'm going to give you a sentence. Don't overthink it. Fill in the blank.
Okay.
First thing that comes to your head. Ready? Buckled up, ready to go?
Maybe.
I built up the anticipation. I hope it doesn't fall like a fart. Okay, here we go. Most builders underestimate.
Most builders underestimate the power of really talking to their customers and listening to them and underestimate the power of women.
Okay. A good deal turns bad
When we are not setting good, clear, shared expectations, we need to be really clear in how we communicate, and that goes both ways.
okay, buyers say they want, but really want.
Buyers say they want price, but they really want something that makes them feel.
The fastest way to lose money in construction is.
uh, Land development.
That sounds like it's coming from bitter experience. I'll put to be continued on that one as well. Teams break down when.
When they don't communicate, when we are assuming that we know what each other are working on, we communication, communication, communication.
Okay, let's make this a bit more personal. When I finally get that rare hour to myself, I like to unwind by.
Reading a book in my hammock with my dogs.
Okay, that segues. So the one movie or book quote that has stayed longer with me than I expected is.
Oh, in the Barbie movie, all the Barbies are being given trophies, and they say, I'm gonna butcher the exact words, but it's like, "I deserved this."
Oh, the Barbie movie. God, take me now. Okay,
No, but, like,
move
the
on.
Barbie movie is so great about owning your own space and self-confidence, and, yeah, I absolutely love that idea of, like, so often we're like, "Oh, I got this award because, there was no one better," or "It was just a part of what I was doing," and we discredit our accomplishments, and that moment where one of the Barbies is accepting a trophy, she's like, "I deserved this." Hell yes, you
Yeah,
deserved that.
I come from the GI Joe generation, so Barbie was somebody that sat in the Jeep with us, right? So that
I
okay, let's move
I
on
didn't
here.
play with
Let's move
Barbies
on.
as a kid. I was never a Barbie person, but the Barbie movie just, like, really it did it for me.
Wow. If somebody wanted to understand what makes me tick, they would know that I.
Love dogs more than people.
Okay.
I love
When
people
somebody
too,
gets to
but
know me.
dogs
Oop,
are better
okay,
than we
sorry.
are.
When someone gets to know me, they'd be surprised that I.
Have broken a ton of bones?
Okay, we'll go with that last one. What a thoughtful gift. As I unwrapped the package, to my surprise and delight, I discovered a.
Ooh. Probably the most thoughtful gift that I've received was my husband got me photography lessons.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Andy, my newfound friend, anything else you want to add to this? Another log to the fire?
No, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for this conversation and for having me.
Okay, well, I wanted to be continued because I'd really like to go back and unpack that succession plan of what you did. I find that really fascinating. And if we can line that up with your accountant or your attorney, whoever helped put you in that, I think that would be a great, great interview.
Agreed.
Okay, thanks for taking time today. Make it a glorious day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Builder Straight Talk. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. Until next time, keep building smarter. This episode is made possible by our parent company, Sound Capital, funding built for builders.